recording. Unfortunately, we did not record Fridays. Module 2, Ben had asked me about that. We just forgot. So I am going to do my best to record all of them from here on out. Luckily, Friday was the maintenance ones are really more question and answer. So for you, Ben, and some others who are on that global sales call, a lot of question and answer, which are useful. We're hoping to put together like an FAQ from those courses, but not a ton of demonstration for the maintenance. Those will be that maintenance is mainly covered in the YouTube videos. Okay, so today is module 3. We're going to be creating a downhole configuration. In a little bit here, I'll share my screen so you can see the surface system software, MWT desktop. We'll talk about what a configuration is, what you can do with it, how to program your tool, how to program your surface system. It's going to be mainly a tour of this utility and of some of the peripheral menus within Guide. Let's see here. Lost my train of thought. So a downhole configuration. It's a simple text file. It comes in the form of a .mwt file, but it's a text file. Every single field, every function that you would want your tool to perform is captured in this text file. It's easily emailed without an issue. You can send these files to us for review. Customers can send them to you for review. I would encourage all of you to reach out to me if you haven't already and get the information required to get this software on your laptop. MWT desktop is very easy to get on a laptop. We've got some tech articles to help you walk through that installation process. But to get that software, we need to add you to the NOV teams, which is managed on the Toltec hub. So I think it's hub.toltec.com, I think. Well, we can get you all that information. And in order to get the download file or to log on and download that software, you need to be in the right teams and have the right permission. We can do all of that. But that would enable you to practice this sort of stuff. Get familiar with the configuration menus and configuration field. When we're talking about a configuration, there's a couple things that can get confusing. So there's the tool configuration, which is the physical configuration of the different modules, how many batteries you're going to use, the order in which you build your tool string. A lot of people call that the tool configuration. Confusingly, everyone calls this text file the tool configuration as well. So that's why I specifically call it the downhole config or the downhole configuration file. It's made in the MWT desktop. Well, actually, MWT desktop and MWT decoder software have this utility that can create these files. A lot of customers simply make one file for a given field, and then the coordinator would hold on to that file and simply send it out either pre-programmed on the software or on a thumb drive, and then that just leaves the end user to upload it, save it, load it onto his surface system and tool. A lot of coordinators do not want the field guys messing with this file. They want one single file for a given field or for a given job or for a given run even, and the coordinators usually manage that. So rarely do you have guys in the field editing this and making changes and doing this sort of thing without the coordinator's approval. So that's why this file is very easy to send and to get out into the field without the end user, the field hand, actually messing with it. But this file is on the surface system and it's also loaded on the tool. Both the tool and the surface system have to have this exact file matching. If they are not matching, the decoder will lose sync and eventually will shut down, will stop decoding. That will cause a downhole failure, and there's no way to fix this downhole. If your tool has a different config than your surface system, then for sure you will run into an issue, and for sure it will cause a trip. So you have to trip out a hole, You have to get both systems in sync, the tool and the MWD software, before tripping back and whole. So this configuration file is very important. Most field hands, not only do they just take a pre-built one and load it onto the system, but they also take screenshots of every stub menu to prove that everything on the tool and the software is the same. The failure mode that we see when they're not the same is usually 100% or high quality decoding, and then at a certain point where the difference becomes apparent, the decoder will lose sync. And the way you can tell that this is a mismatch configuration is that it loses sync every time you cycle pumps at that same location. So if it's 5 words in the sliding sequence, every single time he's going to start losing sync 5 words in at the sliding sequence. If the 5th word in the survey is incorrect and it starts differing from there, then you're only going to decode those first few words and it will lose sync every time at that point. When we see that, it's very easy to diagnose there was a mismatch configuration there. And you would think that's difficult to do. How could they make that mistake? But it happened. In the stress of the job, you'll have field hands making last-minute changes, pushing it to the tool and not pushing it to the surface system, or pushing it to the surface system and forgetting to push it to the tool. We have functions, buttons that you can do both at the same time that mitigate this type of risk, but we also teach them to take their time and send it to the surface system and then send it to the tool, sometimes separately if they're trying to be very meticulous and careful about it. We also have a compare feature which will check the tool versus the surface system. Again, people forget to do these things, or they make a last-minute change in the rush of rigging up, and we've seen it happen plenty of times. Okay, so any questions about the basics of this? One other thing I want to point is our tool tracker software separately. We have something called logging configuration. So you can set the logging to certain intervals for certain variables. So every tool has a couple user configured logging intervals, and we call that the tool tracker configuration, not to be confused with the other configurations I've talked about. So like most things in the oil field, there's multiple names for multiple things, but I wanted to state that you've got the physical configuration of your modules. You've got the downhole configuration, which programs your tools to function a certain way and send up particular data. And then you've got your tool tracker logging configuration. So I try to separate those when I'm talking about them, especially with support inquiries. So keep that in mind. It's just some syntax that can get confusing. So today we're going to talk about the downhole configuration, and that is programmed, created, loaded with the MWD software, the guide suite. It can be done on the decoder, it can be done on the laptop. I prefer doing it on the MWD desktop software because I've got my laptop, my keyboard, my mouse, just easier. The RFD has a touch screen and an electronic keyboard. You can put in a keyboard or a USB mouse, but it's just easier to do it on the laptop. So I do it on the laptop. Okay, any questions on the basics of the downhole configuration programmed with guide? Has anyone, well, I'm sure some of you have seen these files. We'll look at them here in a minute. Any questions so far? Like we've done in the past, you can speak up if we're at a break and doing a Q&A session. You can also type your question, and we'll try to document those questions. So either format is fine.
Okay, Kyle, I have one question.
Please.
So you were telling me that we push the configuration to the surface system and also to the tool. And when the tool is, I want to know if the tool is downhole and we are mismatching the configuration, but I have the one that the tool has. Can I still push it to the surface system, or do I need to have the tool and surface system?
Great question. So if you're positive the tool has the correct surface system, or sorry, the correct configuration, you absolutely can re-push it to the surface system, to the RFD, and then match everything back up. So the bigger problem would be if the tool has the incorrect configuration. So very good question, Edberto. You definitely can send it to the RFD in the midst of a job if you know it's the RFD that has the incorrect file.
All right, thank you.
Great question. Yeah, if the users have documented everything correctly and realize they've just made a change to the tool that they forgot to reflect on the RFD, then they could always revert back to the original file that they know is on the tool and push it to that surface system. And when I say program the surface system, essentially you're sending it over to the decoder. Since he's doing all the decoding, he needs that file. The tool needs the file, and the decoder needs the file. The laptop's not decoding, so he needs, when you activate it, the whole system will have it live, but it's the decoder that really needs that file. So you can always push it to the decoder after the fact. The difficulty becomes when the tool has the wrong file. And even downlinking, unless one mode has the correct set of words, downlinking really isn't going to help you either. It would just be sheer luck that you maybe have one mode that matched the surface system, but you really cannot fix this downhole if your entire file is the incorrect file. Good question. All right, let me turn off my face here and let's move to my desktop. See if I can get the right screen up. There we go. Okay. All right. So can everyone see the software that I just brought up? Someone give me a thumbs up if you can now see MWD. Got it. Okay, I hear Christian shouting from his office. Jonathan cannot. Let's see here. I can. Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, I'm not sure what's going on, man. And looks like most can. Thumbs up. Hold on, I've got a mixed bag of responses here. Let's try to troubleshoot. Oh, okay, just loaded. Okay, so maybe it's coming through slowly. Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, it may take a little bit to switch. Funny enough, Cedar Park right now is not seeing the best Wi-Fi, so I'm sure it's some result of the coronavirus. Okay, so here's our software. We looked at this a little bit last week. Remember, all these different menus, all these different windows are configurable. I'm thinking we still need a general tour of the software as a separate module. Some of these different modules are going to hit very specific utilities. I'll do another sort of brief overview of all of this, but this is the software. This is the look and feel of the software. The decoder looks the same. All these windows are configurable, expandable. You can remove them. If you have an issue, like you've accidentally gotten rid of one, you can always go to View, restore your defaults, and then you're back. Obviously, when you do that, it sort of resizes to fit a standard screen, and I've got a larger screen over here. So let me resize this down here a little bit. So that was just in your View, restore defaults. The options that you see at the top of the screen are mainly cosmetic options that can be changed at any point in your job. Some of them are very important. That's where you configure your widths. It's where you configure your bit to sensor offset. But most of those options can be changed after the fact, even if your tool is downhole. Some of them are very cosmetic, sounds, colors, things like that. Maybe not as important. But again, they can be changed after the fact. The utilities menu has really the most important menus. All these utilities menus interact with the tool in some shape or fashion. So one may program the tool, one may speak directly to your sensor pack. Your tool face offset utility high sides your tool, so it's interacting with the tool. A roll test utility would be used by technicians and repairs to perform a full roll test. And then diagnostics and communications would be used to communicate directly with the tool, the sensor pack. It would show live data. There's a little bit of a chat exchange you can do with the tool, and there's some testing functions in there. So the utilities are the menus that interact directly with the tool. Now you can open these utilities without a tool attached. You may just not see your data. You may not be able to send a tool a file, but you can still open them and explore them. The Mwt Configuration Utility especially can be utilized without a tool attached. In fact, today, I do not have a full surface system at my desk, so I can still train and go through all of this without actually having a tool attached. And for you guys who can just download the software and certainly don't have a surface system within arm's reach, you can still use this utility to explore, practice, edit, review these files. So today we're going to focus on this first one, Mwt Configuration Utility. Later on in the week, we're going to mess around with the Diagnostics and Communication Utility. This is where we can perform a string test, and we can all have a full surface system and a tool string attached where we can practice some invert flow and some on-site testing that you would do. So let's open up the Mwt Configuration Utility. Every time you open a utility, it's going to flash you the about screen to give you an idea of the version and build of software. That can also be seen under help in the about. But these little screens that open up usually go away on their own. So the utility is going to open up here. Right now I don't have a tool attached, so he's looking for the tool. So it's a little slower to open. So here's your about. You can press OK, or you can just let it disappear on its own. So without a tool attached, first he checks for the tool, and it takes a little bit. If there's no tool attached, to just say, all right, no tool, so I'm going to move on. So here's your utility. I'm going to expand it so everyone can see. So most end users won't spend a whole lot of time changing these individual fields. They'll simply open a pre-configured file and then load it to the RFD. They'll take screenshots of these submenus and go through it. Today we'll go through all these menus though. At the top of the screen, you've got some basic file functions. Let's review some of those. So if you go to File, you'll see the first couple buttons redundantly displayed under your File menu. These are also shown here. So you can open a file. So just like any sort of Windows open, you can find a .mwd, or it may even be a .txt, a text file. Once it comes into our system, it saves it as a .mwd, but it's simply a text file. And if I can bring that up, I can show you. So let me go to my background. You're going to see my whole family here in a minute, so forgive the note. Okay, so here's one of these files, .mwd, but it looks like just a text file, right? It's a very small file. You can send, receive it. You can open it up manually and see sort of all the different acronym fields and values. So as you get good at this, you can review these files simply by looking at it in Notepad. You can make changes. You can save it. So it's pretty easy to go through. Once you start understanding the different acronyms, you can go through and review, your survey sequences, your pulse widths, and different things like that. The nice thing is it's all displayed quite well in a very organized fashion in the utility. So that's how you open a file. You'd simply select it. So a lot of end users do it this way. The coordinator will have a pre-configured file that he's made, with the help of the drilling engineer or the directional drilling team from the operator. They may recommend certain pulse width or frequency of tool faces, things like that, and the coordinator would then make it and then send it out to the job, or give it to the lead MWD hand to make any last-minute changes. But you would open it simply here. Okay. All right. So saving it, you can save or save as. You can print the active document like a text file. You've got the next button up here. The drop down has all your send receive functions, which are also displayed visually here as these buttons. You've got another option to go to different utilities from this utility. And then, as usual, help will always display the about screen documentation. You can reinstall some drivers and do some COM router tests. But I never really messed with the help menu from here. So these buttons are the important ones. The nice thing about almost all of our utilities, if you hover over something or click on it, we tell you what it is. So don't really worry about memorizing all the different button functions, but it's fairly easy to predict. So the red can here, we call that our tool. So the red module is a tool module. You've got an arrow going away from that, so that would be receiving from the tool. So you can actually pull a configuration file off the tool. So if there's a failure, or if a coordinator doesn't really trust what his field hand may have programmed the tool with, he can simply request the tool back to his shop, and he can pull that file off the tool. And the tool will always have a file on it. It's either going to come out with the default production file or whatever file was on it last. So you really can't delete the file on some file on there. You can override it, push a new tool file. But this is a nice function if you want to, when we're field testing, we'll often have a handful of tools come back, and you'll simply plug into the DM, which is where it's stored, and pull that file off the directional module. So that's receive. So if you hover over it, you can see receive from tool. The arrow pointing to the tool, that's send to the tool. So that's how you can send your file to the tool very easily. So you can do that independently of the Surface system. We've got separate buttons here, same kind of thing. So here's your RFD, a little picture of that. You can receive from the MWD decoder. This is very helpful if you have some sort of a laptop or computer failure in the field. So if your decoder's chugging along just fine and then your laptop crashes, you get the blue screen of death, there's some issue, you can dump that laptop and pull out your backup, and rather than reloading and checking and blah, 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 you can simply plug it in, connect the radios, and then you can pull that file directly from the RFD over the radios. That will then populate this, and you'll be good to go. You'll be ready to roll. The same can be said if you're running an RFD and the RFD dies. During a connection, you can put up the backup, and then you can push the file from the laptop over the radios to the RFD. And then when you program in your system, you can simply, independently of the tool, send it to the RFD if you want to do things one at a time. To avoid any mistakes with accidentally sending it to the RFD and then the tool separately, we've got a combined button where the function is to send it to the RFD and the tool at the same time, or one after another with one keystroke, with one button click. Again, simply hovering over that is going to show you what it does. Very easy. And then the last feature here is something called a compare. So you've got a little check mark and a vice versa compare button. And we tell you we're comparing the tool and the RFD. So the decoder. So obviously this would be one of the last checks you do. When you click on that, over to the right, it's going to tell you if there's any differences between the two. So one comes up in blue, one comes up in red. So if the RFD has some extra words that the tool doesn't have, it's going to show you the difference in that. I believe the RFD is shown in blue, and then the tool is shown in red. And it'll tell you the difference. It'll if your survey sequence is different, it'll show you the RFD survey sequence, and then it'll show you your tool's survey sequence. And it's pretty easy to identify the differences there. I just lost my thought. Let's see here. Oh, if there are no differences, I believe it says no changes seen. So there's no changes between RFD and laptop. So the wording there's a little bit funny. I think it should probably say no difference between the two, but it simply says no changes between the RFD and the laptop, or RFD and the tool, and you know you're good to go. That's where the field hand will typically take a screenshot of that menu. So that's one of the last things they do after they program the tool, just to confirm everything's in sync. Any questions about these file features up here? And then the question mark is obviously the same as help. It's going to give you the same thing. Documentation, about, things like that. Any questions about these?
Just Kyle.
Yeah.
So when uploading the file from the tool, when I want to check what the tool was programmed with,
Yep.
does it have like a timestamp so I can see when it was programmed, so that I can check that they didn't change it or something like that?
That's a good question. No, I don't believe it does, actually. I think that might be something we've tried to capture within Tool Tracker, actually. And I'm going to defer a little bit to Christian if he's still listening. Christian, do you remember if Bill made that as a variable?
No, it's not. The flow state, when the flow switch values are changed within Tool Tracker, we're logging that in Notepad. But if the configuration file is changed on the tool, we don't log that.
Yeah.
Kyle mentioned earlier about best practices to take screenshots of the windows. When they do that, they'll usually capture the timestamp on the bottom right of the computer screen. So that shows that they took that snapshot before the tool went downhole. We've actually seen in some of our failure analysis, well, one in particular, I remember they sent us the file with the screenshots, and the one screenshot that showed the problem had been updated with a timestamp that was after the tool was in the well. So they had actually tried to cover their tracks and took a screenshot to replace that one page after the tool failure. So it's good to encourage them to take the screenshots, because that's a way to go back and see what was sent to the tool.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, it does happen. You've got contract field hands that, maybe don't have a great relationship with the actual coordinators or MWD company and make mistakes and try to deny the problem. And we've had to troubleshoot through some of that, and Christian's been a pretty good detective when it comes to that kind of thing. But yeah, when you initially send it, there's no screenshot. Or sorry, there's no timestamp. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Anything else about actually programming it? When we do a string test, I can show you some of the menus that will, or some of the messages that come up when you send a configuration file. I'm at my desk right now. I don't have a full Surface system, but later on this week, we're going to see that down in the workshop. So when you send it to the RFD, a message pops up and says, successfully sent to the RFD. When you send it to the tool, there's a loading menu that comes up, a loading message that gives you a loading bar, and it also scrolls through every single variable that's sent to the tool. So you can, with a quick eye, you can actually see all these variables going down to the tool. And then when that's done, you get a nice message that says configuration successfully sent to the tool. If the cable has been kicked out of the tool, or there's some sort of USB dropout when you do that, it'll tell you that it failed. In the worst case, if it thought it made it but it didn't, the compare feature usually tells you if all the file or a partial bit of the file has been sent to the tool or not. So that compare, it's very easy to send it to the RFD, send it to the tool, and then move on from there. We encourage the use of the compare because that really is your last check. And weirder things have happened where it thinks it sent it and then, in fact, did not send all of it. If the file's too long, it'll send all of it, or what it thinks is all of it, and then it actually clips some words. The compare feature is a good way to check for that. And there is a limit in characters. Let me make a note. I don't remember what that actual limit is, but we have run into that. We can find that out. Okay. Let's move on. So, there's a lot of menus here, a lot of fields. One thing to note, for better or for worse, this menu screen, all these different menus were set up quite a long time ago. There are fields in here that we don't change, that we don't use at all. They were fields maybe for a given customer that we customize certain fields and functions for. That customer may no longer be in use. Those fields have remained in this menu. So there are some there is some confusion when it comes to